Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Hey, thank you so much for joining us here on our YouTube channel for episode number 1089. Well, we have a past guest coming back on the show today. Little update, some new parts going on in his business, and just always a very interesting interview. Ric Brewer, who originally appeared on the show in episode number 267, all the way back on March 17th. So, oh my goodness, on St. Patrick's Day of 2017, came on talking about his snail business, Little Gray Farms. Well, still in the snail business, although devastated by COVID with the shutting down of restaurants in the Seattle area, now consulting with people on how to get through the government red tape, and there's a lot of it in this business, which you would not think, and then, of course, how to deal with raising and processing, distributing, marketing, all of that in the snail business. Really fascinating that he's still doing it. He's so fired up about it and loves this business, loves raising snails, and has become quite the nationwide expert on this. So we've got that interview for you. We're going to get it started right now. Ric, welcome back onto the show. Hey, thank you so much for coming on.
It is indeed my pleasure. Thank you.
You bet, man. It's been over 4 years since we talked, way back on episode number 267. How have you been?
I've been great. You know, you look just as young as you did back then 4 years ago.
Yeah, we didn't have cameras going back then.
And I'm not so sure we should now, but we'll work with that.
We'll make it work. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, let's do this. I would love to reintroduce you to my audience. Tell everybody where you live, who you are, a little bit about your background.
Sure. My name is Ric Brewer, and I'm out here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest in a place called Quilcene, Washington. Very, very small place on what's known as the Hood Canal. And I have kind of a unique sideline hobby business. I raise snails.
Yes, I was so fascinated by this the last time that we talked and everything that you were doing. And I'm eager to get the update and see what's going on. But I'm still podcasting. You're still raising snails. So you and I obviously found something we enjoy.
Yeah, well, you know, the joy of having a hobby business is that you don't have to rely on it to eat. Fortunately, I can actually eat what I create as well, so that's helpful. But you know, as with everyone, COVID was a really big factor in business continuing or not. And I still am, even though it's changed quite a bit since I talked to you back then. So
okay, well let's talk about that. Let's talk about because I mean we're just kind of emerging out of COVID right now. Let's talk about how that impacted your business and some of the things you've been doing to keep it going, or some of the pivots you've had to make.
You bet, you bet. Well, obviously, when we first got news of what COVID was doing, the lockdown and such, no one really knew exactly what was going to happen. Still don't, for that matter. But you know, obviously, one of the bigger things concerning my business was the fact that restaurants pretty much closed down, except some of the fast food places that were still continuing. So that pretty much knocked out most of my business because that was really who I mostly sold to. I did occasionally sell to home cooks and that type of thing, though it was not my primary business. And with COVID, because of the huge decline in restaurant sales, I decided that I would just kind of take that year off, as it were, and concentrate on some other aspects and let the snails be snails for that year, and then come back to it once things were starting to open up again.
Sure. Yeah, I would assume, and this is probably the most obvious statement of the day, but with all the restaurants being closed down, the demand, I mean, there's just no demand for your product any longer.
Exactly. You know, this snails are not a fast food. Pun intended on that one, but you know, they chiefly were in upscale restaurants, farm to table restaurants, that type of thing. And of course, because those are indoor dining, they just didn't generally do takeout. Takeout snails probably wouldn't work anyway. And so I would say, you know, business dropped off to almost nothing. And with that too, of course, the really bad thing, not just for me, but certainly for the chefs and the restaurants, is that many of them unfortunately had to close permanently. So, they won't be coming back at all, customers for me, or places to go for people to eat.
Yeah, crazy times to think about that. Your whole life's
Yeah.
work just gone. Okay. Well, I want to circle back around to that, but let's talk about the snail business in general, because one of the fascinating things when we talked back in 2017 was what you were able to do in a really, really small area. And I think a lot of people are looking for a way to get into producing food, to get in to some form of agriculture. And you had this really unique way of doing it. How did you get started with this? Where did this idea come from?
Well, I had been involved with snails for a number of years, believe it or not, but most of it was in a biology sort of way. I had worked at a zoo, and one of my duties was to care for an endangered snail. In fact, it was actually extinct in the wild. And so I did work with that species and a few other species, mostly of a captive breeding
Mm-hmm.
type of situation for rare snails. But that really got me started with thinking about snails as a food product and wondering where it all came from. As I did research, I found out it was almost all canned. It was pretty much almost all brought in from overseas. That naturally led to food security and
Mm-hmm.
issues with production. And so I thought, well, if it can be done here, why not just start doing it? Because I really didn't find any place that was doing it.
Okay.
So I basically just started uh, foraging for some first in the wild to get some breeding stock. And then after the fact, I found out it's, you know, you could say almost illegal to farm snails in the United States.
Oh,
So
that's right.
yeah, so the really big hurdle and why there aren't more of us doing it is because of all the regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Because of USDA, they're considered an invasive species, the type that's used for escargot here, and because that they're very heavily regulated, very heavily permitted by USDA, and just getting through all of those hurdles was monumental, let's say.
Mm. But you were fired up enough about it that you did it. You went through all the red tape.
Yeah, I have just enough Scandinavian background that I'm very stubborn, very hard-headed. Even though I had begun with ones gathered locally, because even though they're invasive, they're pervasive as well.
Okay.
Um, but I knew that if I was going to have to satisfy the demand that I was experiencing, that I was going to have to bring in more from elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the regulations come in.
Okay.
It's actually illegal to bring a live snail or its viable eggs across a state line.
Hmm.
It's punishable by up to $1 million or 5 years in jail,
Oh boy.
which most people obviously don't know. So yeah, anything brought in from the outside from other states is you have to have that federal permit. Because USDA is not used to dealing with snail farms, the permit was actually mostly geared towards zoos and labs to be able to bring invasive species, from
Mm-hmm.
place to place. And so the rules were written thusly. So containment facilities, quarantine procedures, all that type of thing, much more for labs and for farms.
Okay. Now, all of that sounds like a huge pain, but
Yes.
but on the back but on the back end of it, to me, it sounds like a golden opportunity if you can get through it. If you can get through it, you put in the time, you put in the effort, you figure out your way to weave through all this bureaucracy and all of that type of stuff, then you come out on the other end where you can legally import, legally produce, and then sell snails. To me, now you're in an unbelievable niche. You're producing something that almost nobody in the whole country is doing. And it seems to me that it would give you a very large competitive edge. Are my instincts right about that?
I'm gonna give you a yes and no on that one.
Okay.
Uh, almost any business, what seems like a gold mine at first is often not exactly as you imagine it. The continued bureaucracy is an issue because it's not a generally a known food product in America, and I don't want to malign any bureaucrats, but if they can't check a box next to something, then it just doesn't exist, or they don't know what to do with it. So that kind of continues in terms of food production. But I would say yes, in general, if you can get through those hurdles and you can, really source and produce your snails, then yeah, there's not a lot of competition. There's only a couple of us that I'm aware of that have the permit for this particular use, though they don't release numbers. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, once you can get through all those, and if you are able to bankroll it, then yeah, you have a pretty unique market to be able to go to.
Okay. And now, is there something specific about the Pacific Northwest, or is this something, if somebody can get through the bureaucracy and the paperwork, that they could replicate in multiple different parts of the country?
Yes, it is. It is can be replicated.
Okay.
Because with that permit, basically the permit allows you to transport and house snails. So basically, you're creating an indoor, environmentally controlled setting where you can raise the snails. They cannot leave it alive, so you can't sell live snails, but you
Okay.
can sell snails that are processed, which is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that can be done in the heart of Alaska, or it can be done, practically anywhere if you conform to those standards.
Okay.
And they allow it. There are actually some states that just say no, they won't, even though the federal government will allow it. The states can be more restrictive,
Mm-hmm.
and they can just say no. So there is a handful of those that are out there. But in general, yes, you can replicate it.
Do you know which states offhand don't allow it?
Uh, yeah, there's a few. I know. I believe it's North Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, and there's a few others. I actually reached out to every state's permitting office at one time asking, and I received one response in 50 states. So
Wow.
most of them won't even entertain it. I talked to one person at a permitting office. They said, unless you actually file a permit, they're not even going to talk to you about it.
Why did you do that? Why did you reach out to all those?
Well, for my own personal knowledge, but also I do consulting with other folks who are interested in snail farming.
Okay.
So I like to be armed with as much information. I've actually turned down consultations with people after I've discovered that some states won't allow it at all. And so I just say, I would love to impart all this information to you, but it's illegal in your state, and I don't want you to spend money unnecessarily. So.
Sure. Huh. Interesting. Okay, I want to circle back to that because I was gonna ask you about that, but it sounds like you've progressed into that, which is great. But you mentioned bankrolling it a moment ago. For somebody who wants to do this, I mean, what are they looking at in terms of startup costs and then operating expenses?
Sure. Well, I don't want to reveal any exact numbers, of course, but
Okay.
I can tell you that when building this facility, there's a number of things that go into it that are required. They will not give you the permit without it. And so, you could be, depending on the size, you could be into it anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000 or more.
Oh boy. So that's a reasonable expense for a
Yes.
startup on a business.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, when you describe it as a hobby business, that's a significant hobby, $40,000 to $100,000 right there.
Well, there's an old joke that I was told one time that how do you become a millionaire uh, and the joke is, we'll start off as a billionaire and start collecting antique cars, and then you'll be a millionaire very soon because you spend so much money at that. So it's, I don't want to say it's the same thing that applies to the snail business, but
Uh-huh.
um, any farming, you're going to have an initial outlay for equipment and things like that,
Mhm.
hopefully you're going to be able to recover at some point.
Okay. So what was it that you saw on the horizon that I guess enabled you to justify that capital expenditure and got you over the hurdle of that is a lot of money,
Okay.
but I'm going to be able to recoup it? What did you see?
Sure. Well, first of all, for others, I saw a tremendous potential because there are so few people raising them here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Um, eh, it's kind of the Wild West when it comes to that. So if you are able to produce enough, because it is a game of numbers, you really have to have enough to be reliable and sustainable and to produce from there, so the chefs know it's always going to be there. So that's the main thing. And again, it's just I have such an overwhelming interest in snails and this business
Mm-hmm.
growing that I consider myself really a test. So my hope is through these consultations, not only to let people know what they are potentially in for to get started, but really to create a network. To make this truly viable, I think you have to have that. You can maybe make quite a bit of money on your own, not wanting to network and that type of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, farmers help each other.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit of Jeffersonian romance and agrarianism, but I think to be successful and to grow the business, you have to have this network of people that can help each other out.
Okay.
Can be sources for snails or other information for each other.
Okay. Now, once you got through the red tape, once you got through the initial startup costs and you started producing and you started approaching restaurants, I mean, I'm picturing them, hugging you like, oh my goodness, finally. But maybe I'm a little bit over optimistic here. But what was the reaction as you started approaching restaurants?
Sure. Well, I didn't get hugged, but I did get free drinks occasionally.
Okay. That's better.
And yeah, most of them were, they either said, I've been wondering about this. I've wanted to use snails, but I don't want to open a can to feed to my guests. I, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I, and I will tell you, I really did not market myself. People ended up coming to me. I worked with,
Mm.
a couple chefs, and they told another chef, and it's remarkably small world. Um, and so it kind of grew from that. But yes, they really did relish the idea of having fresh snails, local snails, and something that didn't come from overseas in a can.
And
So.
so once they changed to your locally produced fresh snails, did that help them to market uh, their restaurant, saying, "Hey, we've got locally produced fresh, not out of a can"? Did they use that to entice more people to come in?
Oh, you bet, you bet. It's a premium product, so they are going to be paying more than they are for the canned ones. So I think they use, any good restaurant will use anything they can to bring customers in, and most of them were like farm to table type restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was kind of their reason for existing is to really capitalize on local food. So yeah,
Okay.
they definitely use that in their advertising.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that a live snail cannot leave your facility, so you have to process them all there. So, talk to
Correct.
us about the processing. What do you have to do? How much time are you devoting to this? What's all involved if somebody wants to get into this business?
Sure, sure. Well, I can't go too much into it because some of it's
Sure,
proprietary.
sure.
Uh, but basically, if you do not have a commercial kitchen in the facility, then you have to find some way of doing what they call the slaughter,
Okay.
and that all has to be approved through not only USDA but FDA.
Hmm.
Everyone's got to get their fingers in there. So I do have a process for that. They are finished, however, and packed in a commercial kitchen. And so to do that, basically, once they're an adult size and you have your orders ready to go, you have to do your slaughter. You have to do a purge before that to make sure they're clean, just like you do with clams or that type of thing.
Okay.
And then there's a slaughter, and then they get transported to the commercial kitchen because they are no longer living at that point, and
Mm-hmm.
finished processing and packaged from there. So
And
it's a relatively long process just to get them ready to go.
okay. Yeah. So it's, and I'm assuming labor intense that goes with that time.
Yes, especially the indoor growing facility. It's very labor intense. It's a lot of cleaning. They're
Hmm.
being grown in containers. And so there's a lot of switching out cleaning, that type of thing, hand grading them for size. And then of course, all if they're purchasing just the snail meat, every single snail has to be deshelled. So
Mm.
it's not unlike oysters, I suppose, in that regard.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. All right. So are you seeing this? I mean, with you consulting now, are you seeing this as something that's emerging? Is there more interest growing in this in the United States?
Yeah. I would say I get emails probably every day from someone who's interested in doing it. They don't all go through with the consultation because I
Hmm.
do give them a little warning ahead of time of of what it involves. But I think there is definitely growing interest. I think after COVID and people kind of re-examining where they're at in their lives too. That's led to an interest in these consultations as well. But I've got a couple of people that I've worked with, done consultations that are progressing a little bit further along, and so I'm hoping that they get some facilities up and running the next year or two.
Okay. Now, when it comes to consulting and the emails you're receiving, are the bulk of the questions coming in, are they about the red tape in the government permitting process, or is it about the production, the equipment, and finding customers?
Yeah. Well, a lot of these folks have seen articles that I've been in, or maybe even heard the last podcast I
Uh-huh.
did with you. And so they have a little bit of an inkling what's happening, but I would say the vast majority of them have no idea. Many of them have actually never even seen a snail in person, strangely
Really?
enough. So, I after the initial introductory email, I kind of let them know about this permitting and all this type of thing involved, and it kind of lets them know that it's a little more convoluted and difficult than they
Hmm.
at first thought. So it kind of weeds out a certain amount.
Sure. Yeah, I would assume. What what inspires somebody who's never even seen a snail in person to say I'm going to raise snails?
Again, I think it gets back to that Wild West thing. They read a little bit about it and they think that this is just the absolute gold mine because
Okay.
snails are everywhere and easy to raise and all that type of thing. None of the above are well, half the above are true. They are everywhere, but they're not necessarily easy to raise. Um, so I think that's the initial thing. The other part is just a different type of lifestyle. I've got people who've been they're engineers and architects and
Hmm.
all kinds of things, and they're just like, I don't want to do that anymore. This
Hmm.
just sounds appealing to me. So
Okay. Okay. When did you start consulting?
I think I've been doing it for about 2 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
About 2 years. Man, I love, you know, the progression into a level of expertise where you can now guide people through the process to me is really fantastic. I like to see people devote that much time, have that much passion about what they're doing to get to the point where everything you had to struggle to figure out on your own, now you can kind of walk somebody through the process. And I think that really, they talk about the 10,000 hour thing and all of that, that really demonstrates that you rose, I guess, to a level of proficiency in this particular industry. Are there many people in the U.S. that can do what you can do in terms of walking people through this process?
Well, anyone that says that they've got it all figured out, I don't trust. And I trust myself in this because I still don't have everything figured out. Because of COVID, obviously, I'm not really operating technically now, even though I am still continuing to do some smaller orders as things open back up.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I've kind of more moved into doing research. So I'm doing research on breeding and upbreeding. I've
Mm-hmm.
got some snails that are about 3 times the size of what a normal snail would be.
Oh, really?
So kind of hybridizing. Also nutrition and diet, because if you're raising indoors, you're going to be creating a diet for them. So I guess I'm kind of becoming an ad hoc research facility
Hmm.
for this type of thing, even more so than an actual grower producer. Even though I hope to get more back into that later on. So
So do the chefs, do they want a bigger snail?
some of them do. The main snail that's used is a little bit smaller than the type that you'd find in a can, which is a different species.
Mm-hmm.
That species isn't really found much in the U.S. They're mainly actually in Europe. That type is foraged, so they're fairly large. But if you're wanting for an hors d'oeuvre type snail, then these are better for that. If the pool of garlic and butter and all that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other type I think are better if you're including them as an ingredient in an entree. So a little bit smaller. I think very fresh taste is similar, but the texture they're not quite as toothsome as the bigger snails are.
Okay. All right. Okay, so obviously consulting is one of the changes or pivots you've made since we talked last. You talked about some other things that are new. Can you tell us about those?
Well, again, the kind of research aspect of it is new for me. Just looking at hybridizing, look at it, trying to standardize a growing operation. I'm writing a manual right now too that I'm
Mm-hmm.
almost finished with. That can be part of it, and just really I really want to establish more of a consistency um, in the consultations, maybe being able to offer classes that are a little bit more long term than a one off consultation,
Mm-hmm.
and developing equipment so I can sell either plans or sell actual kits
Okay.
for people to begin with.
Okay. This is all very entrepreneurial. Have you always been that way?
No. I don't know. There's just something about this that just really, I keep digging in, digging in, digging in. In fact, yesterday I had a conference call with a snail farmer in South Africa.
Hmm.
Um, and, and that's really one of the things I've been doing is trying to get these contacts with folks overseas who've been doing this for a while. Of course, they're all wanting to break into the U.S. market because they
Hmm.
consider it lucrative, but a lot of hurdles for them to get through that, obviously. But again, it's building that network of people. So this particular person, her daughter is a animal nutritionist, so we're going to be trading some information on snail nutrition and diets and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all education, and it all I think will hopefully not just benefit me, but benefit others as well in the future.
All right. So, with the expenses that you talked about getting started in this business, for somebody who's considering doing this, what do they have to have at their disposal? And what I mean by that is, do they like? I'm assuming they need to live near a reasonably large city so that there is a market, there's enough restaurants to support this endeavor that they're trying to go into. What would you say is the minimum, or do you gauge it based on the type or the number of restaurants? I mean, how would somebody go about determining whether or not this might be a viable business for them and they could make their money back?
Sure, sure. Well, boy, that's a really complicated question to unpack. It really depends. If you're a hobbyist wanting to do it on a hobby level, then it's really what your carrying capacity is in terms of how much you want to spend and how much you anticipate making back. But um, I said earlier, it's a game of numbers. I think to really be truly viable in terms of it being your main source of income, you're going to have to be raising upwards of 150 to 200,000 snails per year,
Wow.
and to keep that going, to be able to sell to restaurants and make your money back. So um, I agree with you. Yeah, you probably are, depending on your distribution, are going to want to be near a fairly major city instead of out, in the
Right.
middle of nowhere. Depending again on your how your distribution system is
Mm-hmm.
worked out. Um, but yeah, it's raising enough, and you obviously are going to have some sort of property where you can have this facility, because it's very specific what they want and what they expect to be able to get that permit. Um, And so if you have property that you already own, which I was fortunate to, in fact, that's kind of it in the background. In the my virtual background is
Looks
a real
great.
place. But it doesn't take a great deal of property. So you could do this easily on an acre or less of property.
Okay. And would you need to be putting up some sort of outbuildings and things like that on that acre?
Yeah, you would need to have some sort of a facility that can be dedicated to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Before COVID, were you selling primarily in Seattle? Were you shipping to other cities? How did that look for you?
Sure. Oh yeah, 95% of what I was doing was in what I'd call the greater Seattle area.
Okay.
Some of it was shipped to other places, but I really like that local aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and because I'm not as concerned about money, I really wanted to stick in the local area. I personally enjoyed not only producing the snails, but actually physically taking them and delivering to the restaurants myself, talking to the chefs. I've met some really amazing people by doing it that way. But if you want it to be a much bigger business, then obviously you'll have to take that into account as you do your system.
Now, when you're talking 100,000 snails in a year, is that 100,000 snails that you have to slaughter and process?
Correct.
Wow.
You always obviously have to reserve some. If you're actually breeding them, you have to reserve many thousands for as breeders. So you continually have snails going, just like with cows or chickens or any of that type of thing. And then a certain number you allot to breeders, and then a certain number are being allotted to what are for sale.
Okay. My goodness, I just did the math on that. 100,000 snails slaughtered in a year. That's over 1,900 per week. I mean,
Yeah.
And that's small work, at least in my.
That's a small number. Some of the farms in Europe are doing tons, like 100 tons of snails per year.
Oh, when you got to that point in the production, were you doing that by yourself, or were you hiring people and bringing them in?
Yeah. Well, I can honestly say I probably have not done that much in production yet. Probably half that,
Okay.
which is why it's still a hobby at this point.
Okay.
To scale up to that, which I can certainly do, will take. Basically, I would have to quit my day job
Yeah.
to really devote to that. So, which is coming. It will come, but I'm just not wanting to do that at this point.
Yeah. Well, I understand. I mean, all your customers got closed down.
Yeah.
Man, but that sounds like a lot of time, day after day after day, processing snails. I mean, it sounds like it's got to be a huge part of the time commitment to this.
It is. I would say, most larger scale farmers aren't just growing the food and producing it and packaging it and everything themselves. So in that regard, it's a lot of time, and that's all part time. That's after the normal work hours are done.
My goodness. Okay, let's talk about the consulting business really quick. I'm curious about this. So you put yourself out there, people are emailing you, calling you, and then it gets down to brass tacks, which is, look, I have invested a lot of time, I've invested a lot of money, I've developed a lot of expertise that I am now willing to share with you, but that's not free. Here's what it's going to cost you. What percentage of people drop off when they find out the actual dollar amount they've got to invest in tapping into your knowledge and your experience?
Right. Well, I have several friends that think I'm vastly, vastly undervaluing my consult. Basically what it is, it's 1 hour. So it's an overview. I tell people up front, you are not going to get every single thing that you will need in your brain in an hour for how to do this, because I've spent basically 10 years or so working on this. But it gives you enough to get started. It gives you enough information to know whether it's something you want to continue with. So, so my 1 hour consult's $85, which I think is quite reasonable.
I do too.
But it gives you enough information to to know if this is something right for you or not, because trust me, you do not want to get into it doing these permits, building a building and all that type of thing, and then go, get your snails and start raising them and go, God, I hate
Yeah.
snails. I hate doing this. It'd be like never being around a cow and then discovering you really don't like cows.
Right. Well, and there's a saying out there. I wish I'd come up with it, but I didn't. But when it comes to consulting or coaching or whatever that may be, people go, "Oh my goodness, $85 an hour. I don't make half of that. That's a lot," or whatever. And by the way, I don't think it's that much. Um, but they're not paying you for that hour. They're paying you for that 10 years. That
Yeah, so it's very cheap. And when you think of
yeah.
that, and my view is if you can't spend $85 for 10 years worth of information, then you're not really very serious about wanting to do it.
Right. And I think that's my next point is, you're not, let's say you gave it away for free. You're not really helping anybody because generally, at least in my experience, people got to put some skin in the game or they'll just let it go
Yeah,
by the wayside. If they don't have something invested in this process or in what they're learning, then it's just way too easy to blow it off. It can just
yeah,
totally go by the wayside.
I agree. I agree completely.
Yeah, that is.
And it's the difference between, let's say you want to do guitar lessons.
Yeah.
Because at first, I was being told from people, it's like, well, don't do this because if you tell them how to do it, then there'll be competitors with you and you'll lose business. It's like, hey, I have a guitar and I have a how to play the guitar book, and I've had that for 30 years. Do you see me playing the guitar? No. And I got both of them for free. But if you pay for guitar lessons, you're probably much more likely, like you say, to actually
Yeah.
take it seriously.
Yeah, you'll actually do the time, the practice,
Exactly. Yeah.
because what else? Otherwise, you're just giving your money to somebody.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Now, in terms of your consulting, do you offer exclusively that 1 hour consult for $85? Or if somebody's like, well, they do the 1 hour consult with you, they're like, I'm moving forward. I got to get through this permitting process. I got to get things set up. Can somebody pay you a retainer or an ongoing fee or something like that to be there for them to help move them through that process?
You bet. I will. I will continue to consult with them. Some things I'll do for free if they have a one-off question that I don't have to necessarily research or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. I might still continue just to help out, which I have done. But if it's going to be involved, or if they really want me to help walk them through that permit process, help them fill out the paperwork, help them answer questions for the inspectors, that type of thing, then that would be continued onwards. So
Okay.
because it was so painful to go through it in the first place,
Yeah.
that it would nice to be able to get paid to go through that pain again.
Well, it's interesting. People who work for the government and they become experts in these processes do it all the time. They leave that government job, they become consultants, and they guide people through the process because it can be so difficult. You don't necessarily work for them, for the USDA or the FDA or anything like that, but just through your painstaking efforts, you now have that level of expertise. And I would bet there's not very many people in the country who do. And you've
No,
got
no. And I'm sure that both FDA and USDA probably don't like me doing this. But actually, I mean, in a way, and I'm not patting myself on the back, they should actually thank me, because most people don't know that taking the snail across state lines and
sure.
all this stuff is illegal. Because they go, well, I can go onto eBay and buy a live snail. And I said, yeah, but it's illegal. And they said, but it's on eBay. And I go, well, you can buy drugs online too. It doesn't mean that it's legal. And I don't want you having an agent knocking on your door,
Hmm.
doing a cease and desist. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to help people out as well. So
Okay.
keep
Well,
keep people out of the prison system.
yeah. Oh my goodness. In prison for snails. What else do people need to know? What other messages you want to deliver in today's interview that I haven't asked you about?
Well, I think it's like most things, that if you really want to do it, you're going to have persistence. Know that you're going to start small. In fact, a lot of people, I say, if you've never really raised snails, if you've not been around them, if you're able to just go out in your yard and find some, get a sweater box or, some sort of plastic box or something, and just spend several months just taking care of them.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find out whether you have the stamina and the perseverance to continue on, and then try and magnify that times 100,000 and see if you're still interested.
Okay. Well, Rick, what is the name of the consulting business or consulting firm? How can people find you if they want more information?
Sure. You can just go to my regular website, littlegrayfarms.com, and that's gray, Gray. And there's a tab that says consultation. You just fill out a little bit of information, who you are, where you're at, and then I contact you from there with more instructions, because it can be a little different. I have to personalize things actually for everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
it does take a little bit more work than just clicking the send button.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's great to catch up, but also to hear what you've been doing and the way things have been kind of evolving for you in your business. Really appreciate you coming back on.
Well, I appreciate you asking me and helping spread the word about our little shelled creatures. And I just really hope people try them, even if it's the canned ones. Try them out and see what you think.
Well, thank you for being here, everybody, and thank you to Ric Brewer for joining us again on the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Hey, we'd love to have you click that subscribe button down below and become a subscriber to our YouTube channel here. Get all of our videos when they come out, and we'd love to join up with you on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And everybody, until next time, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.